Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I'm going to be playing the Greenskins, and I'm going to be facing off against the Empire. This is actually one of my favorite maps because it's kind of just this blitzkrieg to the top of the hills, and nobody really knows what the other player's doing until the last moment, so it makes for a lot of fun engagements, in my opinion. But anyways, as far as my army composition goes, against the Empire, you're going to run into a few things. Historically, and kind of in the earlier days before they nerfed greatswords, you would just see a lot of greatswords and units like that, so you would, mostly bring black orcs. But the meta shifted a little bit, and now I think it's very healthy to bring a combination of orc biggins who are very, very good against halberdiers, spearmen, and relatively low tier infantry, and then also to mix in black orcs who are very good against greatswords. And again, black orcs fare very well against spearmen. Obviously, they're just a far superior unit. I mean, I wouldn't even call it well. It's such a quality difference that it's hard to say. But Black Orcs are just a very well-rounded unit, and on top of that, they're also immune to psychology. So against the General of the Empire on his flying beast who does cause terror, it's very nice to have those guys mixed in. And of course, so it's kind of like the hammer and anvil in a way. You have the tank here, though they hit really hard. I mean, they have 42 weapon strength, and the big ones do also. So again, both very, very hard-hitting units. And then in the back line, I have Goblin Archers. So I have two Goblin Archers here, there's one here, and then I have Durusty Errors. So these three working together, I mean, on paper, just basic Goblin Archers, these guys down here are very, very low quality. I mean, their missile damage is 16, which is pretty pathetic. And but regardless, when supported by Durusty Errors, who sunder the armor and make targets a lot squishier, again, as it pertains to armor, these guys can actually really do a ton of damage and can pepper people down quite a bit. So I really like this combination, but again, there's a lot of vulnerabilities back there. So to kind of shore that up, I have two groups of goblins here. So I have one group of goblins here and one here. So these guys are essentially just going to be on guard duty. They're literally going to be standing behind Durusty Errors and these Goblin Archers and just waiting for cav or heroic units to land and tie them up until the Orc Boarboy Biggins, who I have in my rear flank back here, can get in and help. So two groups of Orc Boarboy Biggins, very good in this matchup. Anti-large, armor piercing, and historically, like I was telling you, in the early days, people used to have these giant Empire goon squads with the Empire captains, and it was very obnoxious. Granted, it's part of the game. So you needed the Orc Boarboy Goon Squad to hunt them down. So I have those two. I have two Goblin Big Bosses. I also have an Orc Shaman and an Orc War Boss who does have the potion. So with the Orc Shaman, I have the Foot of Gork, Fist of Gork, and then also Ere We Go. So it should be a good time. So you can see the goblins already shooting. And then lastly, I do have some Goblin Wolf Riders in the forest over there who are going to come around and flank and do some nasty business. So as far as my opponent, he has General of the Empire. He actually has a Templehof LUMINARK, which has the net ability, the Nets of Amnitok. So it's pretty strong with handgunners because you can bait them out with the handgunners by leaving them in the front and then net down your opponent's charge and really do a lot of damage. So it's pretty good synergy there. So he has greatswords mixed with flagellants. So it's literally in many ways very similar to what I'm doing. You have these heavily armored units, but look at the weapon strength difference between these guys and Black Orcs. That's pretty substantial, 32 to 42. But the flagellants will, they kind of serve as biggins in a way. So he does have those kind of mixed in there. He has two handgunners, two spears in the back. He has a Jade Wizard for healing, and then that's pretty much it, I think. I don't know if he has any cav or anything hidden. A lot of his money that would have gone to a cav unit is being spent on the Templehof. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Should be a fun one. Also, I should mention that he does indeed have an Empire Captain who can't carry potions anymore, but he does have a potion of foolhardiness, interestingly enough. So personally, I don't think it's worth it, but I suppose it's pretty cheap. So right now, my opponent ran over the hill with the Templehof, and at the time, I just kind of got bloodthirsty. You can see the Goblin Big Boss is very aggressively going, as well as the Orc Boarboy Biggins, and I thought it was just a regular LUMINARK, so I made a big mistake here, because I'm probably, what's going to end up happening is if I do charge it really aggressively, and you notice how he paused it here? If I were playing and that was a regular, Temple, or LUMINARK, excuse me, it looks like a swing and a miss there, I would have just kept running, because obviously it was in a very compromised position, but with the net, it's able to protect itself really well, and you can see these handgunners are just sitting here with their just drooling, waiting for these guys to come down in a big clump and get them netted. So you can see the Temple David Hasselhoff, whatever you guys want to call it, is getting ready, and you can see the net of Amnitok being cast, but thankfully I decided to keep my Orc War Boss as well as my Shaman back, just in case some funny business was going on. But he does land, but still, this is a very risky land, because these units, though they are, taking quite a beating here, and they just went, you can see their leadership's down to 34, but it's quickly regaining. They're able to still do some pretty good damage, and also, I do have Durusty Errors and my two groups of Goblin Archers who are just going to start focusing this guy very, very aggressively. So we'll see his armor get sundered here in a moment. You see this group is wavering. They did get out of the nets here, and they're all going to swarm his lord. So the General of the Empire actually gets surrounded. So the Orc War Boss and the Orc Shaman come in, and they use the Wa, just all of those things to just give them 78 melee attack. And then on top of that, the goblin archers are coming in. You can see his armor has been sundered to 53, so he's extremely squishy right now, just taking the brunt of all these anti-large bonuses in that goblin fire. He does use a potion. He probably felt safe since he has a potion and a Jade Wizard, but it was still not enough to get through the green tide there. So unfortunately, he does shatter, and you can see the goblins just peppering him. Look at his HP go down. So right now, unfortunately for my opponent, this Lord is going to bite the dust. So he gets speared by the biggins there, and this Templehof is suddenly feeling a lot less comfortable. So in the back line, you can see some Goblin Wolf Riders coming around the flank. In the front, for the most part, the biggins have unfortunately engaged in many ways with the greatswords here. So it's a pretty unfavorable matchup for me, but you can see my Goblin Wolf Riders actually, they do get caught by some spears, but they're still able to get some through and disrupt this handgunner fire. And it's just so much value for how much you're paying. I really, really like these units as far as the harass units go. So over here, you can see the Black Orcs are engaged with these Tattersouls here. Well, not Tattersouls, but just Flagellants. And this is a really bad matchup for them because these guys have very, very low armor piercing, and these Black Orcs are just going to cut them to shreds. So you can see it's already 47 models to the 41 of the Black Orcs who, we're taking some of the handgunner fire from the cross flank here. But look at the Goblin Archers just focusing these guys down and working with these Goblin Wolf Riders. It's really good synergy there. And yeah, I really, I used to just bring the Rusty Arrows, but they really, really just augment the value that you get from regular Goblin Archers. So I'm definitely really enjoying that. It looks like my opponent's going to cast some sort of a spell here. The Awakening of the Wood. Haven't seen that one, but it does slow them. Doesn't do that much damage. And again, you got to give the guy props for experimenting with those new spells. So the Black Orcs in here are engaged with the mixture of spears and flagellants, and they'll easily be able to take both of these groups here. But unfortunately, some greatswords did come in. And once they start wading into the ranks, it'll be a much closer battle. So I did have to pull some auxiliary goblins to help out with these spears here because my opponent kind of was trying to push through to my gobos, but unfortunately he just had too many troops, and his greatswords and spears were able to collapse my biggin line here, so that was definitely tough. But thankfully, with his Lord being dead, I kind of have free range to just go around in the back with these biggins and these goblin big bosses. I'm just going pretty balls deep back here, so these flagellants are definitely not having a good time, but I'll be probably cycling through here in a moment. But essentially right now I'm just having to retreat my goblins up the hill. My opponent is certainly not out of this fight. He still has an Empire Captain, and he has a full health Jade Wizard with a lot of Winds of Magic, and of course these handgunners, very pesky, just continuing to shoot and doing a lot of damage. My Orc Biggins are very low, as well as these Black Orcs. Over here, this battle is actually going really well. The goblins were able to saturate, and when you can mix in like fodder units like goblins with Black Orcs, in any situation with any faction, it's really nice because these greatswords, though they're going to obviously destroy these goblins, it's going to take them a while to get through. And, that allows your Black Orcs to shine quite a bit more when they're saturated with low-tier units. But unfortunately, low-tier units will definitely scurry away from time to time. So right now, I have some Black Orcs coming in from the flank. You can see my Goblin Big Boss. This is definitely not going to be a fun situation for these spears here, just fighting against the elite of the elite boys here. So up on the hill, though, it's going a lot better for my opponent. You can see his Empire Captain doing some work. He has a nice contingent of spears supported by the captain who are fending off my goblin reinforcements. And, the gobos up here are definitely getting run down a little bit. But, thankfully for me, every time he goes after a group, there's just a whole nother group of gobos to just keep shooting. So this Jade Wizard is just kind of riding back and forth and just doing the best it can. And it used its Earth Blood, so it's healing pretty rapidly, actually. But the gobos are kind of just scurrying back every chance they get. And the Jade Wizard isn't the tankiest. He actually only has 20 armor, so he's pretty squishy. There's a few biggins and Wolf Riders and other units here, but he does have spears supporting, so most certainly not the worst situation. On the hill, I tried to bring my War Boss to try and crack this flank and allow my goblins to get through. These guys are shaking, but they're still holding it down. They got, 9 leadership now. And it looks like my opponent used the Awakening of the Wood again. He seems to be a big fan of that spell. If you guys have tried it, go ahead and let me know if it's something I should explore. I see that the speed might be okay. So if it's an ability you can target a group and slow their speed, that might be decent against Cav to lock them down and catch them. But the gobos here, they've now surrounded this Empire Captain, and they're doing a pretty good job here. Just raining down, probably shooting a lot of their buddies. But so anytime this guy, you can see he's jumping back and forth from group to group, and every time he goes back, I just have another group of gobos shooting him. The Rusty Arrows are on their way back up as well. They should be able to apply some pressure, but he did get those spears through, and they've been very pesky with kind of shutting down my missile fire. But as you guys can see in the valley, I have a very big, healthy group here. I have a Goblin Big Boss, 2 of them in decent health. I got a group of Black Orcs here and here with very, very substantial models, and my opponent's melee force is now pretty tattered. He does have the Greatswords here and also the Empire Captain, who are, breaking at this point, but, they may or may not come back. And he does have a lot of troops over here who are kind of wavering, so if he's perhaps able to stabilize over here with some Greatswords and these handgunners, and at the same time shut down my Gobbo, archers, he might be okay. But regardless, this Jade Wizard is still just trying to take these guys out, but the goblins come in pretty dense numbers. If you scurry them around enough, it can really be a nuisance for your opponents to finish them. So you can see the lads and the boys just charging up the hill here, doing a pretty good job, spearing some of their spearmen. And again, I just love saturating low tier units with higher ones. You can see the Orc War Boss riding around with 2 Goblin Big Bosses. And even though the potions were nerfed, I think Goblin Big Bosses are essential in any army, even against the Dwarves, though they don't have armor piercing. Just their mobility and the poison on very pertinent units, and just their ability to catch things is so valuable. So over here, he does have this Jade Wizard, which is taking the crossfire, just perpetually just being shot from side to side, and he's definitely going to route off here in just a moment. And as you guys can see, there's only 10 seconds left in this match, so this Empire Captain and the rest of the guys, they've had enough. They put up a really good fight, considering a very rough start. I mean, he definitely outplayed me in the beginning there with that Templehof trap, but, his Lord got a little overzealous, and, I may have made the same mistake, simply because you have a Jade Wizard and you have Potions of Toughness and Foolhardiness. Again, but he just took such massive burst. He didn't really, couldn't even survive that. So it was definitely a very tough situation. And you guys didn't get to see it, but the Orc Boarboy Biggins were able to chase down the Templehof. So, if he didn't have the Templehof, for example, he wouldn't have gotten that same trap. Perhaps he could have brought and maybe cut this and just bring like a Light Wizard and then bring, some other units. But Templehof against the Greenskins is a little tricky just because they have very dense, expansive armies. So, it's hard to allocate enough resources to protect them is what I'm trying to say. But the Templehof definitely a scary threat for sure. I mean, if he had gotten, 1 or 2 good shots on my War Boss and just punished him, it could have been a very different game. I could have simply just lost. So, anyways, very well played to my opponent for sure. The Biggins did pretty good. Black Orcs, obviously, you saw them just punishing the Flagellants and Spears. He did have greatswords, but his greatswords were actually busy punishing my Biggins, whereas the Black Orcs, I think, were able to cut through his Spears and Flagellants faster. Because Biggins, though it's a bad matchup to fight against greatswords, they're still pretty substantial combatants with 42 weapon strength, so certainly not pushovers. And of course, you saw the Goblin Archer squad, very solid. I mean, they were the reason his Lord died, and that focus fire is very efficient at shutting down handgunners and all kinds of stuff like that. So, as far as my opponent's army, greatswords did good. Definitely an underperformer in the Templehof, but his Lord, that was a very tough start. That was a very tough start. And despite losing his Lord almost instantly, he put up a really good fight for the whole game. So really well played to my opponent, Almighty All. I look forward to seeing you again on ladder, and hope you guys enjoyed that green cast. Have an excellent night and take care.